All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of Kuya Talks. Today, I have a special guest with me. And first off, I'm excited to be back on the show. I'm excited to um, start the podcast again. And I'm excited to it's the first time using Zoom. So this is going to be a big test run to see how everything goes. So today it's an interesting episode. We're going to be talking about um, basically the Filipino uh, kind of different perspectives. This show is going to take a new direction. It's going to bring on a whole new set of guests. So I'm excited for what 2021 is going to bring. And so joining with me today is Kimy Buere. And welcome to the Kuya Talks podcast.
Hello. I am so happy to do this interview with you.
Thank you. So, starting off, so you are originally from the Philippines. So tell me, what was kind of life there? Like, what age did you come over here, and what was your whole like experience about that?
Yes, I came here 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I think. But I lived in the Philippines for 12 years. I grew up there. I was born there as well.
Yeah,
Um, I'd say that my life has been quite interesting, I think, and even my
yeah,
experiences in the Philippines as well. I think I'll start with my childhood, maybe.
yeah,
I'd say that my childhood consists of both good and bad. I grew up in a very small farming village
mm,
in Casuyan, Cavite. I don't know if you've heard of that of that town, but it's
yeah.
pretty isolated.
Okay,
Um, and in that small farming village, I lived with 15 of my family members in like this tiny house. So you could just imagine how chaotic and maybe problematic sometimes that is.
yes,
Um, we didn't have much growing up. My family definitely struggled financially in terms of paying for electricity, water bills, putting food on the table 3 times a day.
yes,
So I think that kind of shaped who I am today too. It's a huge factor.
yeah.
You were gonna ask something.
Yeah, so while you were living there, did you guys have talks of like when you wanted to move it to America, or how did you view America while you were there, when you heard like stories about it or from experiences?
I've always had family members who were already here in the US,
Hmm.
and every once in a while we would talk to them. And actually my mother came here as an OFW, and she
Okay.
was working here before she got me. And but I grew up watching a lot of American movies dubbed in Tagalog, and
Oh,
I'd say that ever since um, I've always viewed the US highly,
yeah,
because I really thought, because those movies, like, they're always glamorous and huge, and they're
exactly.
always with, like, popular stars. So even then I always thought that, like, wow, I think people who, like, go to the US, they could be whoever they want to be, and the opportunities are just endless. So I've
Yeah.
always wanted to come and really live here, and I was grateful when I had the opportunity for my mom to petition me from the Philippines.
Yeah. So what one experience I like asking people too, especially I loved asking like my Lolo and Lola about what their experience was, but what was your reaction or kind of taking your first flight actually? What was that kind of like?
That was really shocking to me, actually,
Yeah.
because I haven't, in the 12 years I've been in the Philippines, I've never traveled anywhere else. Like, I've never even been to, like, a lot of different parts of the Philippines, like, by plane.
Yeah.
So I was really shocked when my mom was like, "Oh yeah, you're coming here in 6 months. After you do your stuff in the embassy and such." It's like, and
Yeah.
you're going by yourself. So it was really just like shocking to him, like, I'm going by myself. And then they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, you'll be fine. I mean, my mom paid for an assistant to kind of guide me, but they're just there
Yeah.
uh, to go to the actual plane, and like, I felt very uncomfortable, and everything was new to me that I didn't really ask the attendant, like flight
Yeah.
attendant, like for help. So it was it was a very interesting experience. I didn't know how an airplane like kind of worked, and like
Yeah.
inside it was very different.
Okay. So I mean, so when you came over here, what year was that actually when you first arrived here?
2015. Yeah,
2015. Wow. Okay.
yeah.
So so when did you actually start to kind of what introduced you into like the politics with everything? When did that become more serious with you?
I've always had an interest in politics, even then.
Yeah.
I've always idolized Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago and
Hmm.
the Philippines. I've always looked up to her, but I think the main push for me to be involved was definitely 2016, when I've been here like a year, and my dad and I would. My dad is a big um, has a big like interest in politics. So
Yeah.
whenever I'm curious about things, I'm just like, so how does that work? And he would tell me like just the general view of like what that certain topic is about. And finally, I think I just found myself like really, you know, um, getting into it. So I started researching, and Donald Trump
Yeah.
announced his candidacy during that time, and reminded me so much of our current president, Duterte, in
Hmm.
the Philippines. So I was like, this is really interesting. And, I kind of just um, observed his leadership over the years. And then I came across PragerU. And that's when I was like, oh, this is great. This is a great opportunity for me, since I observe it like really close. Like, I think I want to be part of something like this,
Yeah.
or what PragerU offers. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, for the viewers out there, Kimmy is actually an ambassador for PragerU, and we'll go more to like what they kind of promote and what they kind of talk about and teach. Um, but going back to the 2016 elections, would you say, even though your dad was more had the more conservative views, um, did you kind of think of yourself already as a conservative then, or were you trying to still like learn where you were gonna fit?
During that time, I still wasn't very aware of the two-party system.
Yeah.
Um, in the Philippines, there you don't label yourself as anything really. There are
Hmm.
multiple parties, so um, I didn't really know the right name to call myself, but
Yeah.
I know looking back during that time, I was like, oh, I'm definitely a conservative, because, as I researched more about it, I'm like, oh, I really have the same values, and the things that they deem important are important to me too. So it's really during that election where I learned that I'm a conservative, or I lean conservative.
Yeah.
I wasn't very sure yet if maybe I also lean like left, because I know I also kind of agree with some of the left. So but I knew, as I observed, that I was like, okay, maybe I lean more right,
Yeah.
because of certain things and certain topics, that they talk about.
That's interesting. Yeah. Going at what my experience was for that, it was very interesting because um, 2016 was my senior year in high school, and it was the first time that was the only that year was the only time we had government and economics. And I remember in our government class, we had to they gave us a bunch of bills and stuff like so we had to separate the classroom like who was considered Democrats, who were considered Republicans. And in my class we were actually the Republicans were the minority, But he still, for our assignment to kind of get along with each other, he gave the Democrats policies they had to pass, and then he gave us things that we had to pass, or we had to find some like agreement. And in that, it was kind of more eye opening to see like what each party kind of represented, and from a certain point of view, you can see why someone else would support this. Um, but it was great. It was a great experience because you got to see how there, in a way, government could work with still two parties, and it doesn't have to be always one sided. And um, but it was interesting because growing up, I was also very my parents, most of my family is very conservative, so it was. But I wanted to still be open. I still wanted to learn because I always believed that uh, if you're always like listening to every if you listen only to people who just believe and kind of just follow what you follow, you doesn't expand you to grow of
Yeah.
what other everything else is offered out there. So at first was oh actually I wanted to ask, was Donald Trump the first person you were actually rooting for the presidency, or were you picking kind of swaying on other candidates?
No, from the very beginning, I liked him
Yeah,
personally, and I know a lot of people, they're not a fan of the way he is as a person, maybe, but to me, I kind of related to him more in
yeah,
terms of that. And I'm not gonna sit here and defend his mouth because I know he has a foul mouth,
yeah.
but I do think that it was a huge factor of why I voted or I supported him in the very first place because I think I was so used to just politicians kind of being too polished, and that
Yeah,
didn't sit very well with me. So I was like, yeah, no, I can't relate to these people because they don't. To me, initially, my reaction was, if you're too polished, you don't know the struggles that common people go through. But
yeah,
with him, even though he is a billionaire um, and he has a grandeur life, somehow I felt as if he could sympathize with the people who are in the who are middle class,
yeah.
and just the common people in general.
That is true. Yeah, I always so initially at first I didn't actually I wasn't rooting for Donald Trump. I actually was actually rooting for Dr. Ben Carson, and because I loved his whole backstory, I loved all of his work. The only thing though is when the debates came, he was very soft spoken, and so I knew it was very difficult for him to compete, of course, with Trump and everyone else kind of talking over him. So I knew that was kind of his downfall. Still love the guy. I think he does a lot of great work. Then after that, I was supporting Ted Cruz. He still does a lot of great. I loved his credentials are outstanding. So I was always like following it, um, but it got to the point when Trump became the nominee, and then Hillary became the nominee of the DNC, that I kind of felt from her past and President Clinton and his kind of bad experience, like what he did in office. I just personally, even if I had more beliefs, because I kind of was a moderate more in that time. I really wasn't fully conservative yet, but it was interesting because yeah, I couldn't support it. So I said, hey, if I have to vote, I want to vote. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. And I said, you know what? If we go through this whole thing and it turns out bad, then I'll take I'll accept it and be like, okay, I made a bad judgment for voting. But I don't know, when people don't take the opportunity or the time to really look at what the administration has done and only focus on just words sometimes. And and I don't know. It's interesting how we people look into politics, and we have to find perfection in people. When people have their flaws, people say things. People it doesn't mean anyone can just say anything that is just in the pure meaning of insult. But when you take a word and then or you take a phrase and you're trying to kind of reinterprets it to follow a certain agenda that you're pushing, it's interesting that people look for perfection in that. But but especially when, what was your reaction when all of the Russian allegations came out and against Donald Trump during, when he just came into office? Like, what was your whole thought process on that?
I I really thought that that was just an agenda
Yeah,
from the left right off the bat because they really didn't see that coming. That
yeah,
I didn't even I supported him and um, fully supported him, and my whole family supported him, voted for him. But did we have that, you know, like great feeling where oh, I think he's gonna win tonight? We
yeah,
didn't because again of the media, and he was portrayed like oh no, like he's not getting the popular vote, so what's going to happen now?
yeah,
So we supported him, but we didn't have a very good feeling about how it's going to work. And when it turned out to be the way we wanted it to be, and all of a sudden there was this Russian allegations going on, I was like, oh,
yeah,
that's all politics right there. Like I don't think that they necessarily cared about the uh, the um, the election in general, or like
yeah,
the system and how it works and how it was rigged. It was more like we just want to get him out of the office. And right there and then, I was like, this is going to be a very interesting 4 years for him because it
yeah,
must. And I think I was right on that. They gave him a hard time, and now that with what happened to elections, I can't help but feel bad for our president because for the past 4 years, no matter what he's done and no matter what how much good he's put out there, nothing
yeah,
nothing's enough, and all he gets is backlash. So for me it's just more like that, that would kind of hurt me, as a person, if I were him, because you try and do the best you can, but then these people, they're
yeah.
they're just all around crazy.
Yeah, no, so when I had more of the moderate views, and then I was also very shocked. It was a very different time because it was interesting back then in 2016. Anything the news said, we kind of just believed it as completely true. It was a very interesting time, I think, because even reflecting on it now, it's like whenever the polls would come out or any, new evidence on anything, people would just take it, be like, that's true hard evidence. Like, this is journalism. This is they're only going to give us the facts. They're only going to give us what's true, not hearsay. And when he won, he didn't, of course, win the popular vote, but he won all the, electoral uh, votes or the yeah. But still, it was very. I was very shocked because they just projected Hillary. So when the Russian allegations came, and when I viewed it, um, at first I viewed it as like fair. I said also um, that if the Mueller report came out and it showed that he did have collusion, then okay, then I will judge it and be like, okay, so they were actually, they had something that was going to be truth. And when people said they'll accept the results of what that report was going to come out, but when it came out that there was nothing to prove of Russian collusion, people still didn't accept that. Which it kind of, that's to me was my big turning point, I guess, to really become more conservative and say like, okay, they just kind of came up on this alibi. And then slowly over the years you hear about what kind of, just kind of the dirty politics of what came out of that, of where there wasn't really even good enough evidence to even show that that even happened. And but one big thing I even saw too is just the amount of like peace and all this stuff where he's like trying to, how he's handling foreign affairs right now is really amazing. It's really and no one reflects that. Even the peace deal that would just happen in the Middle East. And I just think to myself, like, even if you don't like him as a guy, you don't like him as the president, that's fine. That could be anyone's opinion. But to not acknowledge like what actual work is going in by his administration as well as him, and yeah, and so I was. So that's what made me think that it's just a whole party fully on just trying to get him out and trying to make him look bad when there's actually still good things that people, don't want to open their eyes to.
Yeah, that
Um,
that to me has it's just so ridiculous because, like what you said, even if you don't like the person, I get it. You like the it's personal preference. If
yeah,
if you relate to, like, for me, like what I said, I personally related to him in terms of his personality. It's very We're both strong and outspoken in that
yeah,
way. So I do like him. But I understand why other people won't like him personally, but at the same time, you have to make a logical decision and say, hey, I don't really like this person, but he gets the job done. So
exactly.
what's the difference? Like,
Yeah,
I'd rather have a leader who gets a job done than talk and
yeah,
then nothing happens. So for me, like, hearing and seeing people just blindly not vote him because for the mere fact that I don't like him and he says this, that
yeah,
to me was just very appalling. I'm like,
yeah,
this can't be happening because, especially with the left's ideology, like, no, we because they have this impression of their own party or like their members, that they're like, oh no, but we care about the people and this. Okay, if you
yeah,
care about the people, you're going to have to make sometimes decisions that you don't want to, but if it's the best for your people and for everyone, then you should go with that.
yeah,
So
exactly. I totally agree. It was kind of yeah, and just the fact that it's not really fair. I mean, not everything I know in politics with life in general, not everything is fair, but with anything that came out with Hunter Biden or any of the things that came out with Biden that are actually legitimately about his career, Joe Biden's career as a senator, as a politician in general, that no one wants to view it and just say, hey, that's kind of it led in a different direction. Um, yeah, it was quite. Before going into more of the kind of going transition more into the PragerU, and also like how like relationships from I think kind of starting from the earlier part of this year when everyone just took this deep dive where politics now is the most important thing in everyone's lives. What do you hope to, as an ambassador, what do you hope to kind of uh, push with being, push with PragerU's content? What do you hope to like achieve with it? Do you just want to just educate more people? Do you want to become more of like a motivational speaker for others? What's your kind of goal with PragerU?
um I I would go to with the first choice. Initially, I entered PragerU or Prager Force because I was really concerned with how deeply biased even educators are nowadays. And I've gotten into positions where I'm 30 against one,
Yeah,
like 30 students against one. And the teacher or the professor is the one that's kind of pushing like the agenda. It's like, you're not supposed to be involved with this. You're supposed to give the general idea and let the students talk it out and express their opinions about it. But that was really a turning point for me because these educators know that half of these kids will not go back to their home and start searching, like, was this actually true that
yeah,
he said? No, they look up to you. It's a natural thing. So whatever comes out of your mouth, they're going to believe it. And it was really concerning to me that that's how it works nowadays. So when I entered Prager Force and I applied for it, my main goal, even now, was to just educate more people and to make sure that they're on top of their game when it comes to politics or current events, because
yeah,
there's so many things that are so biased now, like what you said. Back then we only had one truth, like we all believed in one thing and that's it. But
yeah,
now journalism, like, it's a business, so they want to divide you as much as possible, and they have so much control that people just tend to just not even, research about the other side. Both sides do it, but
Yeah.
that was definitely my main goal. I wanted
Okay.
people to challenge their views and go out there and say, but this doesn't make any sense. Can
Yeah.
you explain this to me? So yeah.
So, in a very to summarize for the viewers out there, how would you summarize PragerU's platform more than just like a conservative platform? How would you kind of describe their stuff?
Well, everyone knows that Prager University or PragerU is initially just an American media company that provides like free resources and videos on important topics in life. But to me personally, it's kind of more than that.
Yeah.
I think it's an open and accepting community where whatever views you have, you're able to put it out there and ask whatever question you have. Because even on our Prager Force Facebook group, there are
Yeah.
people out there that are not conservative, and they're able to post whatever they want to post and kind of challenge whatever conservative ideals are there, or they're kind of questioning. So for me, that's very important in a community that I'm a part of, because it's really bad now, even in universities. I can't really speak up
Yeah.
because of the whole thing that's happening. And I think PragerU does a very good job in providing just kind of like an open group or an open forum where whatever you're thinking, just let it all out and let's
Yeah.
talk it out and let's see and let's meet in the middle. We might not agree, but as long as we listen to each other, we're going to find out that we have more similarities than differences. So that's what I really love about Prager, your Prager Force in general. And on top of that, they've given so many opportunities for young conservatives or young people in general. Like for me, I was able to be a part of a shooting or taping with Will Witt, with huge conservative um, influencers. So that's a big opportunity. Back then, we didn't have that.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for what PragerU has done or Prager Force has done for me.
Yeah, and for any of the viewers out there that actually, even if you have more of a liberal mindset or a Democrat mindset, I would really take the chance to say check out some of the work that PragerU is putting out, because it's very your first thoughts when you hear this, there's more. It's a more conservative based platform. It's very eye opening to see a kind of a new perspective, and so I would encourage everyone to kind of take a look at it, because they're doing great work. And it's like recently, when I just joined the Prager Force, just because I was always listening to PragerU, but for whatever reason, I didn't really see the about Prager Force, and they were doing more to like push out their content. So when I joined, I was just really excited, and I was like checking out everyone, all the members, and just I was really excited about it. And yet that's how I kind of ran into you, because I never really have seen kind of more the Filipino representation about kind of anyone that's really um, pushing it, that because I most Filipinos that I've been with, or even in some of the college uh, groups, because I was part of a Filipino organization at Cal State Fullerton that
Mm.
was called PASA, but it's completely one sided politically when they even got into that, and it kind of turned less into it started to become less like community, and we had even a member that was more conservative, and he was kind of being kind of shunned in a way, by other people. So, but before we transition to the last topic, because the biggest thing was actually kind of losing a lot of relationships, kind of coming out more politically. Um, how have you been coping with like loss of friendships or things just because you have a different viewpoint than others?
Um, since entering high school, I'll be very honest, I don't think I had many friends
Hmm.
And I don't think I connected with a lot of people because um, I thought that they didn't have kind of a world view of
Yeah.
whatever is happening. So it was very hard for me to connect with them. And on top of that, I grew up in a different environment. So there was that hardship that, like, oh, it's already hard for me to kind of be friends with them because I didn't go through the same things that they went through when they were little.
Yeah.
And on top of that, whenever we get into political discussions, I'm very open and outspoken in a way that I don't really filter my mouth. So sometimes it comes out very strong, and I don't think a lot of people here are fond of that. But to me, I really have always been true to myself, and even now, I don't really like suppressing who I am just for people to like me.
Yeah.
So I would say that even though it is quite hard not being around like a lot of people or like not building a lot of friendships, I didn't really stress about it that much. Like I knew that if they were open enough and they were good for me and I was good for them, that it would just come out kind of naturally. The friendship will come out naturally. But
Yeah.
other than that, I don't really pay too much attention in losing people because there are people out there that are there to stay for the rest of your life, and some are just there to serve as a lesson. So
Yeah.
like
Oh,
I
exactly.
yeah, there's no like, I don't know, I think it's also in the Philippines, growing up in the Philippines, people don't pay attention to really that kind of stuff. Like it's easy for them to let go of things, which I think is really good. And people there are not very sensitive too.
Yeah.
So I think I got that. I got that from being there for so long, and people here were just, oh no, like that's not what
Yeah.
we're used to.
Yeah. It was very eye-opening to me because there's some people that I don't know. There's a lot of times where they were very politically heated, I should say, or they're just very they get very agitated at anyone that doesn't have the same beliefs as them, which is very interesting because it's like I think it's a great luxury of freedom of speech and the fact that everyone can share different ideas, and you may completely disagree um, with my beliefs or my views, but I'm gonna stand by it. And if people can't come on that common ground, sometimes I think that it's a little sad. It's really sad, and especially when you were talking about earlier about your life in the Philippines. One organization that I love volunteering for in a way of just sponsorship. There's a organization called Unbound, and so they you can sponsor either kids or you can sponsor the elderly or young adult, but you're helping them in the Philippines. And I thought it was crazy because like while everyone is talking about the things all first world problems, all the things that they're struggling with, or when they spend the whole time just belittling people on social media. Unbound posted a clip like a couple months ago of just like a kid in the Philippines carrying a bunch of supplies over like this large river after like a storm. And I just thought to myself, like, completely different view of just like what's more important out there sometimes,
Yeah.
like, and it was kind of just eye opening that, you know, that people sometimes their agendas and their things don't really match of like what they're actually kind of, I don't know how to say, are they how they're actually they're just focusing on the wrong things sometimes. I think that's the easier way of saying it. And it was
Yeah.
just eye opening. There's all these other people out there, and the fact that um, when people come out and they put a certain, this is the sad thing, the labels that conservatives get. It's really sad
Yeah.
that because you can't, like, people can't believe that you can have a conservative view, and there's all different types of people demographically, and also just different experiences that led to people becoming conservatives, whether they came from other countries and they saw the effects of socialism and communism, and they don't want America to go down that same way, and that's why they're conservative, or the fact that they've been given more job opportunities in a more conservative, environment, and the fact that, um, you know, we're taking away a lot of like the traditions and the people, uh, the things that we hold true, that what makes the U.S. so great,
Yeah.
and it was just really sad that there is, that's why I think it's so important, um, especially what PragerU is doing, especially with the Prager Force, that they're trying to do as much as they can to educate the young adults and the young, just the younger generation, that there's so much more than what you're being told. And I think it's just good for anyone just to kind of get a bigger perspective and then challenge your views, because the whole time since March,
Mhm.
when the Black Lives Matter movement came out and Democrats were more proud about speaking, that they were kind of being more, um, lose my train of thought. They were just more, I lost my train of thought. They were just more aggressive, I guess, on uh, their views.
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, I I going back to the first point you made with um, seeing that like little girl in the Philippines like
Yeah.
struggling just to go to school. Like you're gonna go through all that just to go to school, right? And for me, that has always been in my head. Like, I've experienced so many things in the Philippines that are just here. Like it's so easy. I swear, like in the Philippines, being exposed in that kind of scenario
Mm-hmm.
at a very, very young age, that, like it's not all about you. Like
Yeah.
life doesn't revolve around you. And adults in your family don't have time to protect your feelings and to deal with sensitivity. So
Yeah.
for me, going here was a big turnaround and a big blessing. And I've always done my best because, oh my God, quality of education in the Philippines, materials, they're not they're all owned by the government. You can't bring them home. You can't use them. With I don't know if you're familiar with it, but books in the Philippines in public schools, you're not
Mm-hmm.
able to write on them and use them
Wow.
like on your own on your own terms because it's owned by the government. So you can kind of take it home and read it, but you have to write it on your notebook for you to know like, oh, this is my homework, or this is so it was very
Wow.
manual, everything. I wouldn't have many computers. We needed to write everything out. So if in the book there's 16 pages of that story, you're writing 16 pages of that
Wow.
story on your notebook. And do you hear kids complaining about it? No, because that's what they want. We were taught from when we were little that for you to get out of poverty or this kind of community, education is the way.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very appalling to me when I came here, and I was eighth grade when I came here, and things were all printed out, and it was so easy. You're just gonna read it, and simple
Yeah.
things like that, and put your name on it, and circle things. And then I hear this one person saying, "Oh my God, that's too much work," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh," I was like, "I don't think you realize how lucky you are," like we had to work so hard over there, and you're forced to grow up
Yeah.
fast, and because people, you have to make people don't have time for you
Yeah.
to to deal with that kind of stuff. So
I was not aware of that kind of situation, or what that. Wow. That's even just a whole nother
yeah,
perspective of just seeing like just how good we have it here in America sometimes, or
it's
just what we're actually exercising so much of, what freedom, and just, and yeah, that's
it's
kind of,
really,
I'm just shocked.
yeah, like appalling to me when I came here and I hear people and I'm like, that's your biggest problem? I was like, really? The biggest problem is not being called the right pronoun. I was like,
Yeah.
you gotta be ashamed of yourself because compare yourself, compare yourself from other people in the world. Like there are billions and billions of people dying out of poverty, out of this, out of that. like real problems, and then you're here, you have everything, and you're complaining about that.
Yeah.
So it's really crazy to me, and I can't help but just speak up about it because it's
Yeah.
quite ridiculous. And yeah, whenever I feel so sad, like whenever I hear people talking like that, because they don't realize how good the US is. Here,
Yeah.
you're free to do anything.
Exactly.
Anything. I was like, they're in the Philippines. I know people from my family that have graduated summa cum laude or cum laude of their college, and they're working at a Jollibee or this or that.
Yeah.
There's no jobs, there are no opportunities. And here in the US, it's right there. You just got to grab it.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's very
Totally.
different views.
I totally believe that. Like growing up, just always hearing my story of my Lolo and Lola, um, I always believed in that American dream, even growing up, that really you can go and be whatever you want. Um, but one thing for like since ever since March, this I finally remembered what I was going into. So when, especially when Black Lives Matter came out and everything, I went I kind of just took a break from social media, but I also took it as a way to challenge my conservative views. So every and this is kind of calling out because this is all my followers or all my friends that I follow is just they're it's a totally I'd say 90% unfortunately is have liberal views, Democrat views, and I tested it. I really tried to understand where their viewpoints, where they're coming from, what they're donating to, and which politicians they support. But I just it's just so hard to understand because if you just do any research, just even you're not even trying to dig up dirt on anyone. You're just trying to say, hey, what kind of stuff have they done, or what kind of things um, have they promoted? And when you kind of don't see anything that really kind of um, makes you feel any more motivated to support them, I just say I can't. Or you just see the effects of they have a lot of good intentions of things that hey, let's pass this, let's help this. Um, and I just thought to myself like that's a whole different perspective. Like the idea of trying to think like food stamps
Yeah.
and like growing up. My first job I worked at Stater Brothers, and it was a very interesting experience that we had this lady come in. She was wearing a nice dress. She had like the newest iPhone. She had a big ring on her finger,
Mhm.
and she paid for all of her food and food stamps. And I was amazed because there were actually like two homeless people outside the store, and they don't come in for free food, but then she's coming in, and her situation could be different, but it's funny how none of my coworkers at that time, that they believed that she really needed it more than the people that were outside. That we continuously always like when it was ever our lunch break or anything, we would help out the homeless man and just say, hey, do you want any food? We can get you or anything. But we said as soon as she checked out and she went into the parking lot, we're saying, hey, let's see what kind of car she drives. And she pulled out in a Mercedes. And I just thought that just showed that our system, while it had a good intention, it's going to the wrong people. And I can't, of course, be the judge of who it goes to and say, but I just thought in that situation, I'm pretty sure it went to the wrong person. That and people should realize like, hey, when conservatives point out like, hey, it's a flawed system, sometimes it's not the idea of like fully getting rid of it. It's just to acknowledge like we need to fix it so that it goes to the right people. Or just
Yeah.
there's just so many things, and it just like all of those experiences kind of built to see just a bigger picture of some things that people don't
You-
really reflect on. Yeah,
Yeah, you know that the system is flawed when it's right, right before your eyes. You're seeing it, and like it just saddens me because there's a lot of I know a lot of people out there who actually need help.
yeah,
And the government is just turning a blind eye on them. It's like, no, oh well. Like
yeah,
I just think that the welfare system has many things wrong with it. I don't necessarily agree. And like what I said, there are. I feel bad for the middle class in general, because the rich doesn't have to worry about anything because they do have a lot of money, and the poor, they're taken care of by the government. The middle class handles everyone. Like
Yeah.
without the middle class, this is gone. Like I don't think any country would survive.
Yeah.
So for me, it's very appalling that you would do that to your people. I mean, I get it. Like the poor needs help, obviously, but you have to understand that you have to kind of make welfare system a much more effective one,
Yeah.
and don't give them an incentive to not work hard
Yeah.
and to continue just depending on you, because that's not fair. And it's
Yeah.
like, to me, the government should be there to help if ever things don't work out the way it's supposed to be, but not for you to use the government as a backbone in your everyday life. I just think that that's really unfair. And if people truly cared, like from the left, about these things, that they should definitely tackle it.
Yeah. What is your what is your idea about something I always saw closer to the earlier this year was a kind of a movement. I think it was very light, I think, but it was all about mostly Asians and Filipinos were posting about unlearning the traditions that were taught to you. What was kind of your take on that? You know, when that all kind of pushing.
I i very much, I don't know, I value traditions so much, and the Philippines have such a rich culture that I don't know why anyone would even try to get rid of that. And I think that's so sad. Like we fought so much to be an independent country, and at the end of the day, you're just going to throw everything away. So
Yeah.
that to me is, the Philippines is very sentimental, and the culture in general, like to me. And I think it's definitely, it hurts, seeing your co-Filipinos do that. Back then there was this one sense of unity where, no, we're going to fight for the Philippines and the Filipino traditions and the Filipino people. But now I think that the Philippines look up too much to the West, to the Western countries, that they're trying so hard to be just like them. Because
Yeah.
even now, I see a big change. Back then, you don't see any of that. On Facebook, my friends are all like BLM too, and I was like, "Is that's not an issue in the Philippines? Like, why are you even like posting anything about it?" I was like, "And do you know anything about it?"
Yeah.
So, and like what I said with the traditional values in general, I think it's disappointing
Yeah.
that people are being like that now. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with the traditions we have. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If anything, I think it helps us
Yeah.
be a good person. I don't remember my parents ever, like, or my family ever telling me anything toxic, like, about it. It's just more like, oh, be respectful, make sure you respect your elders, your teachers. It's always been like that. Or make sure that you're dressed nicely so people don't look at you at a certain way. And I don't know, I don't think those are wrong. I think those
Yeah.
are just a proper advice, universal advice, I'd say, even.
Yeah.
So
That's completely true. I think it was kind of being pushed when I was it's very interesting about that whole idea, like with the norms that of the even like how everything we were raised, by our parents, by our grandparents, and just everything they've taught. I think it's just the biggest thing is like just take that information and make the best of it to adjust to your life, and I think people are taking it very literally, like you don't take completely drop that and then just learn this whole new set of ideals and stuff. And but to me it's like those traditions, hold true of like who I am, who I want to, grow as a person. And mostly just coming out more and just speaking because I couldn't just stand by anymore without, really expressing that I hope this for any all of my friends or family, because that's the majority right now of who's following me. And it's just kind of just for them to kind of open their eyes to maybe a new experience. It's tough because you may not agree, but it's just there's different other perspectives out there, and it's okay to have those set of ideals. Um, and it's just it's sad too that if you don't say you support the BLM movement, that initially puts you as a racist or puts you in a certain category, when if you just take it at its bare minimum and you just think, I'm not a fan
Mhm.
of the actions being taken in the protests, and it's unfortunate people's businesses are getting destroyed. It's not even like targeting, which businesses affected them personally. It's just any, and it's very unfortunate to me or it's unfortunate to see that, I should say. And so um so as we kind of wrap up, um, are there any projects or promotions that you are kind of with any of your work you're doing right now that you'd like to talk about?
I'm working actually on a project with, and we're working on this sort of platform where people with different beliefs could speak up and kind of tell their side of the story. And it really just started when I had this project from my university about COVID.
Hmm.
And Paul and I actually don't have the same views. And it was really interesting to see that we don't really have the same exact beliefs in politics or in really anything, but we were able to have at least an hour and 30 minutes conversation about this thing. And I've
Yeah.
never had that sort of interaction with people who don't have the same beliefs as me. And it was really interesting. So we, after our Zoom call, we were like, I think we need to we need to make a project or a platform where people could definitely do the same thing that we did. So I'm working on that, and we're working on our first video. So if anyone could just check out maybe the Instagram page and Facebook page of Just Generation Z, um,
Okay.
then that would be perfect.
Yeah, I'll be sure. So I will include that in the description and add more of that just to promote it. But yeah, I think I'm glad there's so much content, but we're limited on time. And so I'm personally, I hope that we could do more of this and actually even bring more people into the discussion. I think this just is the starting point of what to add. I think really moving on to 2021, even despite however the election kind of favors, I still want to be able to next year just really promote, others in PragerU and other people spread their voice and get more people to come out and speak up
Yes.
for what they believe in. Um, what would kind of for your closing remarks, what would be your message to someone out there, either that don't have the same views as you, or they're not ready to come out and kind of be more expressive about it because of the judgment they may get from others? What would you say to them?
For those maybe people who's not ready yet to come out and to really speak their minds, I would suggest them to really challenge themselves and don't be scared of the threats that maybe goes around and such. But I mean, speak up, but be wise as well. Don't,
Yes.
um, even though we say that, words don't really matter and we shouldn't really focus on that, at least still know what battles to fight, because in this generation, no matter how much, whether we like it or not, we have to adjust. So speak up, but be smart about it. And for those who have maybe a different opinions or beliefs as me, please just open your eyes and be open minded and make sure that every once in a while you have a conversation with someone who doesn't have the same views as you, because you'll, as long as you listen to someone or just keep talking, so like have just keep having civilized conversation, you're going to realize that you have something, you guys have more similarities than differences. So that's all I could advise for those who doesn't really have the same beliefs. And just be kind to people too. Like,
Yeah.
don't waste your time commenting on other people's posts and having, putting bad comments out there, because it at the end doesn't really help anyone. So if you want to actually have a genuine conversation with that person, just message them and say, hey, I'm kind of curious about this. So
Yeah. And so my closing remarks would be, well, that was great. That was actually, you hit most of the things I was even going to say too. But yeah, I would hope that anyone that, after you take in everything from this podcast, I hope uh, I just want this to be a very, um, I want to humanize more of like actually, what conservatives and the different groups that different backgrounds that come into it. I hope for others that even if you don't agree, really take the opportunity, check out PragerU's content, and it's very eye opening to see the perspective and let it grow on you. Challenge your beliefs and challenge it so that if you come out of it stronger in your own, more power to you. But if you come out of it with starting to have second thoughts of where you're coming for, like really kind of build on it, learn on it, and try to learn more, because that's the beautiful thing about America. The beautiful thing about our country is really the idea that you can have people can have different beliefs, you can have people challenge them, but it's the diversity of it, and that's still always what I find astonishing. I never want to live in a world where everyone that I see just believes and agrees with me, because then there's no there's no diversity in that. There's nothing really to look forward to or to have good discussion and debate. Um, and just, yeah, I hope for the next year everyone's a lot kinder to each other, and they don't try to group anyone into a specific characteristics. Even though as much as I don't agree, I do my best to try not to assume, because there could be a lot of people who are on the fence,
mhm.
and it doesn't help, that if people are just doesn't help kind of yelling at each other through the internet. So, but anyway, so Kimmy, thank you so much for coming on to this episode. I hope we could do more work later and kind of,
Or
yeah, and just we'll do a lot more collabs and just see what can come out of this. But
invite me anytime. I'm open to having any sorts of conversation.
That's wonderful. There's future and upcoming things with that, and thank you everyone else for watching and listening, and I hope so. I'm excited that Kuya Talks is back, and we'll see where we're gonna go from this. So thank you so much, Kimmy. It was great having you as a guest.
Thank you.
All right, and then that is a wrap.